rest is actually how productive people stay productive. It's how innovative people stay highly creative. It's how people don't burn out. And then you do something, you're producing from your place of burnout and not actually producing from your place of like energy and passion and fullness. So you look at what you produce and you're like, I suck, this doesn't work, I need to quit. And really what you need is you need rest, and you need to figure out what type of rest you need.
If you're a new video business owner or you're seasoned, the people that I know personally that have struggled in life, struggled in running a business, haven't had good balance. This idea of rest, I just think is so good. And the thing I always tell people is there's always gonna be another email to answer. That stuff is always going to be there. There's no such thing as inbox zero, because as soon as you do that, somebody else's email, and it's just like this endless cycle. So at some point, we need to hit pause or stop and rest.
So I think we each have to determine in the work we do, what drains us. And get really real about what type of energy that we're using, because that type of energy has to be restored if we're to stay in a place of health in that area.
On this episode of the show, I interview the author of the best-selling book called Sacred Rest: Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, and Restore Your Sanity. Super good stuff. I'm glad you're here. Hey friend, welcome. I'm Ryan Coral. If this is our first time meeting, it is a pleasure to meet you. I am super happy that you're here, and I think that you're gonna get a lot out of this episode. I love bringing on guests that cover topics that I wrestle with, that I align with, that I need more information about, and if you're like me, you need more rest, and not just more rest, but better rest. So this episode is chock full of all that kind of stuff. If you're, building a video business and you have not figured out the key to sustainability. I should write a book and call it that. I want to share with you some of my best tips and tricks to that. I've got a free workshop. You can download it, get access to it, where I cover the things that I've learned over the last 20 plus years of running a video business, what has worked well and what hasn't. And I'm certain that if you haven't seen this workshop before, you'll walk away with some tips that will help you in your video production business. And you can get access to that by going to studiosherpas.com/workshop. Lots of shush in there. You don't need to shush, but I maybe need to say less shushes. Also, doors are currently open for the biggest, best in-person event for corporate and commercial filmmakers called the Onward Summit, it's actually hosted at our studio in the Detroit area in Michigan. Super easy to get to Michigan. We are a Delta hub at the DTW airport, and our studio is about 45 minutes from the airport. This is going to be our 5th annual, and I'll say annual, let's not talk about the year 2020, our 5th annual in-person event, and it is going to be the biggest, the bestest yet, and potentially the last one, at least for a little while. So if you've been on the fence, now's the time to come. You can get more information about the summit by going to studiosherpas.com/onward. It is called the Onward Summit, and would love, love, love for you to come. Okay, that's it. Let's get into today's episode. Roll the tape, DJ. What's up, friends? Hey, welcome to another episode of the show. Today with me is Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, who is the founding physician and CEO of Restoracists. She is a board-certified internal medicine physician. She's a speaker and an award-winning author, no big deal on any and all of those things. She's an international well-being thought leader featured in numerous media outlets, including Prevention, MSNBC, Women's Day, Fox, Fast Company, Psychology Today, Inc., CNN Health, and TED.com. Again, no big deal, all in a day's work. She's the author of numerous books, including her bestseller, Sacred Rest: Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity, including insight on the 7 types of rest needed to optimize your productivity, increase your overall happiness, overcome burnout, and live your best life. She's going to talk about all those things. And in the meantime, I'm going to go take a nap and get a little bit of rest. I'm just kidding. Dr. Saundra, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to have you.
It's my pleasure, Ryan. I'm excited to be here.
Your reputation precedes you. I did mention that Mike Kim just talked about you at our last mastermind meeting, and he just had the best things to say. And I have for so long, I've aligned most with people in the online space, well, I guess in beyond the online space, that are so much more, I don't want to say mature, but the idea of the hustle culture and like you work. I'm listening to a book right now where Gary Vee, I love like the content that he puts out and his passion. It's like unmatched. But I did just hear him say this in his book yesterday when I was listening. I think he said he starts his workday at 6 a.m. and he ends his workday at 10 p.m. And for some people, I will say that there are some people, when I think of Steve Jobs and I think of, just the most epic, business leaders that have done like huge, unbelievable, amazing things. Like there are those people that I think probably do have a very unique and distinct calling that's much different than the majority of people. But most people, if I was to take Gary Vee's blueprint and say, okay, I'm going to do 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. because I could do that. And I would be fulfilled in some regard in doing all of this work. But when I look at like the fulfillment that I get out of all of the things, my family and my friends and community and all the other things, I'd be like, I would be missing a whole lot. So I preface with just saying like, there are some very important values that I would hope, if you're a new video business owner or you're seasoned, the people that I know personally that have struggled in life, struggled in running a business, haven't had good balance. And not necessarily like good work-life balance, like whatever that means, but this idea of rest, I just think is so good. And the thing I always tell people is there's always gonna be another email to answer. There's always gonna be another proposal to write. There's always gonna be another video to edit or another idea to dream up and to brainstorm. That stuff is always going to be there. There's no such thing as inbox zero, because as soon as you do that, somebody else's email and it's just like this endless cycle. So at some point, we need to hit pause or stop and rest. So just that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's why I'm so excited to be having this conversation. And so far, it hasn't been a conversation. It's just been me blabbing. What was the thing in your life where you realized that this was going to be or become a pretty significant part of your life's work?
Well, I burned out initially. So 10 years or so into medical practice, I had a life very similar to what you described with Gary, which I have to get back to in a moment, because that may still not be a bad thing, depending on if he's incorporating rest throughout his day. But I wasn't doing that. I was work. I had a fantastic work ethic. I had zero rest ethic. I did not see how the two could have any relationship to each other. Rest was what you did when after the work was done, and there was always work, so there was never time for rest. And so when I burned out, I didn't want to leave my profession. I loved what I did, but I had to figure out how can I make that lifestyle sustainable, because it wasn't the way I was living it. And so that's where this journey started for me, and when I first began the research and looking into all of it, there was no thoughts of a book. There was no thoughts of a work-life well-being consulting agency. I was just trying to survive. It was very selfish. And in that process of learning some things as a physician, I was taking it back to my patients. And they're the ones who actually really convinced me or showed me that there was something more to this, because they were taking my little handouts that I was giving them. Because, a doctor's office appointment's 15 minutes. I don't have time to explain 7 types of rest and do your blood pressure and all this other stuff in 15 minutes. So I was giving them these little handouts, and they would come back and they would say, I need 5 more handouts to give all my friends. And I'm like, I don't even treat your friends, Why would I give you? So it was like, what are you talking about? And I was seeing how it was really affecting people's lives just with like this little bitty bit of information. That's when I started really processing the fact that I need to share this and I need to figure out a way to share it in a way that people can really implement it and they can share it with their friends that are burned out.
Yeah. So what is that like when you, I think we all kind of have felt burnout at some point. And I will say, every profession has its like thing. And in the world of video, I just remember the first couple of years of running my business, Andrew and I were newly married, and it was kind of like, there could always be something. If I wasn't editing a video, I could be exporting a video. The computer needed a process, and if I wasn't doing that, I could be burning a DVD, and if I wasn't doing that, I could be printing, a DVD label, or there was just, and it was like I wasn't always doing the thing. Like I might watch a show with Andrea, and then back when there used to be these things called commercials, I could like run upstairs and go do something. I had like 2 minutes to go do something and then come back, but I was just always on. When your patients were telling you, like, what was the thing, like, what was the result that they were getting, or what were they feeling that, oh my gosh, this is like so good, I need to be sharing this?
Well, the big thing was there are people who I had told like specific lifestyle changes or case specific medicine or done tests where nothing was wrong, but they were still telling me they were tired and sleep by itself wasn't solving it. They were reading, self-diagnosing from some of the things I wrote because I was telling them, if you experience this or this, you may have this type of rest deficit. And then I would give some specific ideas of what they could do to pour back in and restore that deficit. They would do those things and they were feeling better with no changes in medications, just with some small tweaks to how they engaged with rest. And the thing that I think a lot of people really clicked for people is that it wasn't very hard. It wasn't like they didn't have to take a vacation. They didn't have to quit their job. They didn't have to find some mega block of time to take a nap in the middle of the day or something. It was small, intentional restorative activities. And one of the huge mindset shifts for a lot of people is that it wasn't just about stopping. That stopping actually isn't the only way that we rest. That sometimes it's a restorative process that you do to actually pour back into the place of depletion. And I think it was some of those tweaks that really got people thinking and saying to themselves, I don't understand rest.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, and I know you've probably been in like 8 million interviews. I don't want to like ask all the questions like big picture, because I think at the end of the day, when you think about how you can be most helpful in this audience, you're serving entrepreneurs that, are kind of like fighting for survival in some aspects and feeling like, gosh, if I don't show up and work, who's gonna, these bills aren't gonna pay themselves, so somebody's gotta be doing it. What do you think, where can somebody start in this process that you've kind of developed?
The big thing that I find, there's really kind of 3 parts that people have to first engage with. Is one is evaluating what type of rest they're actually needing and if they're getting it. So just to name them, the 7 types of rest include physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, and creative. And so when you think about each of those buckets, being able to evaluate where am I using energy throughout the day, and am I doing something to actually pour back into the bucket that I'm using? And so if you any of those 7 are things you haven't even thought about, begin thinking about it, because that's probably the one you're deficient in, because you're not doing anything intentional with it. So that's number 1. Number 2 is then looking at some of your regular habits within your workday and seeing if there's a place where you can begin to incorporate rest within your daily habits. So you're not trying to find time for rest. You actually already have the time. You're going to habit stack some to be able to add some restorative processes to that, which works great if you're a leader or if you're an entrepreneur. And so you really don't have a lot of downtime. Your life is very fluid and there's a lot of flexing happening within the day. It gives you permission to embed rest. And some of the activities are things that you are kind of a once and done. You set it and forget it. It's once you fix that thing or you put the restorative practice in place, you're not always having to think about it. And then the third thing is making certain that when you are approaching rest, that you're not leaving it as kind of the secondhand citizen to the deal. Rest is actually how productive people stay productive. It's how innovative people stay highly creative. It's how people don't burn out. And the World Health Organization the way they define burnout is number one, you're tired all the time. Well, that's 80% of the population. Number two is you no longer have passion for work that you do. So if you're an entrepreneur, I assume you got into something you love, because that's what most of us do when we branch out. Then if you lose the passion for the work that you're doing, that's a sign that you're starting to burn out. Because it's horrible to have passion for something, but then not have the energy to do it. And that's usually the reason the passion has waned, because you don't have the energy. And then number three is that the work you're producing is actually at a lesser quality of what you're capable of. So then you produce something, but you're producing from your place of burnout and not actually producing from your place of like energy and passion and fullness. So you look at what you produce and you're like, I suck. This doesn't work. I need to quit. And really what you need is you need rest, and you need to figure out what type of rest you need.
Love that. There's a lot in that. I'm curious to know, when you were processing this for yourself in your practice, what were some of the things that you started doing that were really, really helpful in kind of helping restore your strength and passion?
So within the type of work that I do, I spend a lot of energy emotionally and socially with people. I'm in internal medicine, so I'm in the ER, the ICU. I have a medical practice, a 10-physician group where I'm a partner with. So I'm dealing with stuff like everything from strokes to heart attacks to cancer, death. I mean, it's not fun work, on the outside looking in.
Right.
The fun part is helping people not get to those things and, live healthy lives and restore and feel great and enjoy their lives. But I was experiencing a lot of emotional, what I now term as professional emotional labor. Like in the moment when I'm in the ICU with the patient, I'm an empath. If I'm in the ICU and it's someone that's one of my normal patients I've been seeing for 10 years, I may want to burst out in tears because my friend's dying on the bed, but there would never be a tear that leaves my eye. So the emotional professional labor commands that I suck all of that in. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you may have problem paying payroll because, things didn't balance out too great in the books that particular month. You're not going to tell your team that. You put on a happy face and you figure it out, and you carry that professional emotional labor because that's what's demanded to be professional in that particular setting.
No idea what you're talking about.
Of course you can't. This is for the other entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But all of that pressure has to have a release. It's okay to be professional, but there's a level of inauthenticity that occurs in that professionalism that happens there, and you feel the labor of that, and it's stressful. So we then have to have places where we can be authentic, we can be transparent, we can be real. And for myself, I needed to understand that emotional rest is not trauma dumping. I was afraid to come home and talk to my husband about these hard days because I'm like, I don't want to trauma dump. But trauma dump is me telling him all the gory details of what happened in the hospital. Emotional rest is me telling him how I felt in those moments.
Yeah.
And it's a huge difference because it's more vulnerable. It's saying I felt useless. All those years of medical training didn't help me help that patient. And so there's a much more vulnerable statement than it is to say, hey, this happened and that happened, and giving all the details. So I think we each have to determine in the work we do what drains us. And get really real about what type of energy that we're using, because that type of energy has to be restored if we're to stay in a place of health in that area.
Yeah. Is there a specific area with the people that you work with that is constantly this one's always rising to the top?
Yeah, mental rest deficits are huge for a lot of people. We're overthinkers. We're always thinking, we're always processing, multitasking, decision fatigue.
Are you reading my mail?
Mail is a problem too. Everybody's inbox has 10,000, things sitting over in there unread. So there's so much stuff. So I'm not reading your mail, but you probably aren't either. So there's there's all this stuff that we're processing. And the problem is most of us, that actually impedes with our ability to actually have high quality sleep. Sleep is important. But I mean, how many times have you and people who are listening got in bed completely exhausted? It's like your brain won't shut up. You're thinking, and all these thoughts and ideas and all this stuff pops up. And it's like you can't turn your mind off to actually be able to go to sleep. Well, that's an emotional rest deficit. And on the flip side of that, let's say if you're trying to remember something and you're like, why is my concentration and focus so off? Another form of emotional rest deficit. It's hard to concentrate and kind of really center your thoughts if you don't learn how to clear that cerebral space, how to use meditative type practices, how to get your mind to untangle some of what we call the monkey brain, where you're swinging from thought to thought, and you can get those things to quiet down some so you can focus and do deep work.
Oh man, this is really good. Okay, so let's just talk about this one for a little bit longer. Like, what would be some practical things? You mentioned meditative, or are there any specific practices or things that people that might have, lots of emails in their inbox and lay down at night and then just feel like, oh my gosh, there's so many things?
There's a couple of things. So people who have the nighttime processing, it's helpful. The way the brain works when you are ruminating over a thought, it's the same process you do when you're studying for like a test. So when you were studying for chemistry or calculus, you thought about those systems over and over again in preparation for the test. Before you go to bed, when you're ruminating, your brain is like, oh, there must be a test coming because they keep thinking about this stuff over and over again. And it'll hold on to that thought even at the expense of you sleeping. So the process of actually writing it down on something concrete gives the brain permission to release it. It's like taking the test. It's like, oh, I finished. I have it down and it's safe and secure. And so that's a very simple one for someone who's ruminating. Most of us will not actually have, and I don't mean don't have like some fancy notepad that you're keeping all your thoughts. It could be literally just a little piece of paper, a Post-it note. The process is actually what gets the brain to turn it off. Another thing is, you mentioned meditation. Meditation can look different for so many people. So for some people, actually going for a jog is meditation. It causes mental rest because in that process of jogging, they're narrowing their attention down from all the things to, I got to breathe and what's my foot pace, So they focus their thoughts so acutely that it acts like meditation. So don't think meditation's like humming with the piece of grass. It can look completely different. It's just that mindset of focusing down. And then you have things like, other ways of getting mental rest may be something as simple as just having a focal point that you're using and trying to, like, I call it a word chair. And so I'm a person of faith. So sometimes if something's worrying me and that's the ruminating thought, I have teenagers and they're both headed off to college. So there's all kind of things I get to worry about. And so if I'm worried, I may have like a focus word that I'm going to think about. So whenever my mind tries to go down all these worry points, I think of peace or I think of joy. And so I just redirect my thoughts back to that word that I'm going to seat my thoughts in. And that's a way of practicing meditation or mindfulness in a way.
I love those. Those are very good, very practical. You mentioned jogging as you were talking about like the rhythm and the counting the steps and whatever. It made me think years ago, actually the first few years of me running my business, I would take fishing trips with my father-in-law and my two brother-in-laws. And I kind of always a little bit like fished or whatever, but when I was running my business and we would go on these trips, oh my gosh, I loved just being in the river, casting, and like, there's a little rhythm to it. But that was like the most restful, like, I'm so glad that you brought that up because it was like mindless. And I think I don't know if it was like Thomas Edison or Mark Twain, but one of them would go fishing and wouldn't even put a lure on their line, right? It was just to be out and to like, to rest, right? I just, it was so good.
Yeah. One of the things with that is creative rest actually has to do with the rest we experience when we appreciate beauty. And some of the studies showed that about 60 to 70% of people experience creative rest around bodies of water. And so something about being around bodies of water actually inspired them, led to creativity and innovation and kind of an opening of the creative process. So you can get more than one type of rest at a time. Yeah. It's just the intentionality of it. So fishing, someone who goes for a jog out in nature and they're actually appreciating nature, in the moment. Or maybe they're even listening to Listening to music that's inspirational to them is a way that they're getting kind of their creative juices inspired as well. And so there's multiple ways of kind of combining that up. But that's the thing. We have to like not judge each other's rest. It's very personal. What makes you feel restored? I get these weird emails from, women oftentimes who will be like, my husband's out there chopping wood and he says he's resting. Well, he works behind a computer 24/7. Right. His physical body is not exhausted, but his mind's taxed. Right. Oh, and chopping that wood is pretty robotic.
Pretty mindless.
And so it shuts it down so he can actually process through things.
Yeah, my wife probably wished that I chopped wood. Because I think the body that you get like from chopping wood is probably what she would desire. Anyway, I digress. I remember, I think it was year 1 or year 2 of running my business. I read David Allen's Getting Things Done. And in reading that book, one of the very first things that he suggests that you do is take out a notepad or something and just start writing down all of the things that are on your mind. And as you explained that process, it's like you're tricking your brain or whatever. But I did that practice after reading that, and I had this little moleskin, and I just started writing, business ideas, clients to reach out to, things to follow, I just made this list, and I think I filled like 4 pages of notes. I went to bed that night and I had not experienced rest. And I'm not joking. I'm not trying to say like, oh, no, it was this like magical moment where I was like, oh my goodness, that practice of getting all of these things that I felt like I'm kind of like balancing and I'm going to forget something and then everything's going to break. But I wrote it all down. And it worked. I rested that evening, and then that just has become a process. I have a regular journal where I write stuff. I have a to-do app on my phone, and I probably have 1,000 ideas and things and business ideas that could be worth billions of dollars that I just need to get out of this brain because I hold too many things up there. And once it's there, I might not even do anything with it. But the fact that it's out, according to what you just shared, like it helps my brain and my body just be like, whew, okay, glad that we're not going to forget that.
Yeah, and you can't process it if it's not where you can like analyze it. It's like if it's only a concept, it's almost like we have to, it's just like within business. At some point you have to go from concept to implementation. Yeah. You can think about your business all day long and never have a business. There has to be a transition. It's like the writing it down is almost like signing a contract. It's like, okay, this was good enough to move from the concept to something concrete. Now, am I going to make it something tangible?
Yeah, I love that. I'm wondering, I love taking naps. I wonder if you can talk about naps at all. Is that part of any of the 7 types that you talk about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you have the cessation and you have the active forms. And so one of the passive forms of physical rest includes sleeping and napping. And those are the things where you let your body just literally go out and have moments where it can just be passive. Physical rest also has active forms, which include things like the stretching and like yoga and massage and foam rollers and all that stuff. But so you have 2 components of that physical rest. But yeah, napping is different for each person. Some people cannot nap. I mean, I have had people who napping just messes up their circadian system. Yeah. They cannot sleep after they take any kind of nap. There's other people who can't function unless they have that 1 or 2 hour nap most days of the week. Very individualized. And so if you're someone who finds that you try, it's like everybody's telling you napping is great and you try it and you're like, this messes me up. You. If it messes you up, don't do it. But if you find that middle of the day, you can take a 30-minute power nap and you actually feel fantastic, figure out how to incorporate that in your day. Maybe your lunch break is actually a nap day, break.
Right. Yeah. I'll do 17 or 18 minutes and I might only sleep for 4 or 5 of those minutes, but I look forward to them almost every day. Well,
a lot of people do intermittent fasting. They're not eating for long periods of time. And so I find that people who do intermittent fasting do really well with that lunch break nap because they're not eating anyway. Take an early lunch break. A lot of people are doing what's it called, 12 to 8. And so I have a lot of people who mention that. And I'm like, you know what? Take an 11:30 to 12:30 minute or 11 to 12 lunch break, so to speak, and allow your body to have a little bit of recovery time, after that.
Yeah. What's one of your favorite stories of people that you've worked with, like transformations that, somebody who was just burnt out and then came to a place where they started doing some practices of resting?
One of my favorite stories is actually one that's a little bit odd for me. It's I had a gentleman reach out to me. He told me, he goes, my wife read your book, Sacred Rest, and she went to restquiz.com and she took your quiz. And second she took it, she turned to me and said, you got to take this quiz. And so I took it and I got my rest scores. And she was like, we did your 30-day challenge. So I have a program in a 30-day challenge. So they did the 30-day challenge. And he was so honest. He said, I'm doing this stuff that seems so simple and so basic. I'd never done it before, never even thought about it, but it just seems too easy for it to have any effect. Yeah. He's like, I am 15 days in. He goes, and in the past 30 years, I have not slept through the night in all of those 30 years. He goes, I just woke up this morning at 8 a.m. He goes, I never set an alarm clock because I always wake up. He's like, I just woke up at 8 a.m. I am now late to work thanks to you, but I had my first full night's sleep in 30 years. And you know what? That made my day, because this is basically someone who's saying, I didn't believe this stuff was going to work. My wife made me do it, kind of thing. And I'm having to go tell her it actually worked, because that's the kind of testimony who then will go tell his friends that, these simple things actually help. They actually make a difference. It doesn't have to be some big vacation that you take, because most of us, vacations are exhausting. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It's these small intentional tweaks.
Mm-hmm. I love that. What a cool story. 15 days in too. He didn't even finish.
No, he wasn't even finished.
Right? Yeah, that's really cool. My father-in-law would not be able to, certainly he would get up in the middle of the night, but just to use the restroom, not because the practices that you're He doesn't listen to this show, so, maybe he'll listen to this one. Anyway, so you talked about habit stacking. You talked about things that you can do throughout the day that won't really interrupt what you're already doing. What are some of those things?
So let's say if we're looking at creative rest, and I mentioned about water. Well, you may live nowhere near water. You might be like me where you're middle USA and there is no water. Yeah. And so one of the studies looked at how our brain responded if you were looking at the actual ocean, pictures of oceans, or pictures of or colors that resemble oceans and water. And the response in the brain's the same.
Oh my gosh.
It's beautiful. Whatever it is that motivates you, you don't actually have to physically be in it. It's just you have to be reminded of it. So something as simple as putting a picture of maybe the water and you fishing on as a lock screen somewhere, so it's popping up. If you're someone who does a lot of, we have a lot of people working hybrid right now situations and working from home. So if you're doing a lot of Zoom meetings or a lot of Teams meetings and all of these things, and you're finding that you're getting sensory rest deficits, you're getting kind of overwhelmed in that regard, something as simple as making sure that your team has uniformity in your backgrounds. So because if you were all in a regular meeting space together at an office, you'd all be looking at the same beige walls. So come up with a team backdrop for your Zoom meetings that everybody uses as their screensaver. It creates the same visual kind of cohesiveness. So the brain's not processing the cat walking in this room and the bookshelf in that room and having to do all of the filtering that's just going to exhaust the brain and the sensory input at that time. So that's a few kind of quick ones.
Yeah. I love that. That's so good. Oh man, I love this conversation. I'm feeling, just even thinking about resting in other ways, I'm feeling a little bit rested. And I do have this enormous TV on the wall across from me, and I'm like, I just need to put I can get a pretty screensaver, knowing that if I had the ocean just kind of going, that would be helpful. Oh, okay, yeah. Or wear some Apple Vision Pros and just have be in a ocean setting. That's really cool. Okay, so people should take the quiz, right? You still offer the 30-day challenge?
Yeah, so the quiz is at restquiz.com. And once you take that, it kind of pushes you out into all the other things so you can see what your options are if you're wanting to go deeper.
Yeah, I love that. And then anywhere else people can follow along with the incredible work that you're doing?
Yeah, my main website is drdaltonsmith.com. That's where I talk about the work that I do with companies and organizations and mentoring.
I love it. Thank you so much for giving us this time and these insights. The work that you're doing is so important, and it really, it's having an incredible impact. So please keep it up. And again, really appreciate you sharing with our people today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ryan. Thank you.
All right, now go take a nap. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Ton of great takeaways. Let me know what your takeaways are. Leave a comment below in the video or shoot me an email. My email is ryan@studiosherpas.com. And don't forget, doors are open for the Onward Summit. Go get your ticket now. It's probably early bird time where you can save the most money. So the sooner you do it, the better. And if there's something I can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can DM me. I'm at Ryan Coral on the socials and at Grow Your Video Business. And I gave you my email address. So now you've got all the things, except for my cell phone number, which I'm not gonna give you. Thanks for being here. I do appreciate you. Thank you for listening. It is my honor to host this show, and I'm gonna keep doing it until I feel like it's not adding value or I just don't wanna do it anymore. So, all right, I will see you on the next episode because there will be an episode next week, okay? Bye for now.